Hello, everybody. This is my class for my RTL, and we're going to cover the science of geography and maps. So, the first thing that we want to talk about is what is geography? We plan for today, we're going to cover the tools, the fundamental tools that geographers use and other people use when they're using geographic methods. And the best tool that we have is maps. All right. I'm going to hand out some worksheets to everybody. So as you get these worksheets, the first two questions are your answers to what two questions you might have about geography that you didn't know or you want to know about, and as well um, what you currently know about maps and geography. And as you're answering these questions, I'm just going to we see that there's a picture of the globe right here. What we're going to talk about in geography and what geography talks about is how the study of the world is what we study. It's not just looking at maps and finding islands and finding mountains and why the mountains are there, but it also encompasses the study of the people around the world. The study, geography is the study of the earth. It's everything on the earth. Animals, plants, microorganisms, people, the earth itself. As you see here, when we break the word down to the Greek root of the word, we see that it's to write about the earth. And the way we see the geography is that we see a physical aspect of it and we see a human aspect of it. So we study human beings and how they behave in the systems around the earth. We study the climate, we study water, study plants, like plants and animals. And then we study this over time and space and how things might be different. This geography is a very broad subject that incorporates a lot of very different subjects that everyone is interested in. Just to note that while we're going through the PowerPoint presentation, your worksheet has questions that you can answer while we're going through this. If you need me to stop and you need me to pause so that you can write it down, feel free to raise your hand or pause the video and you can go along with this, all right? So we see right here on this slide that we have maps. Now, maps come in various shapes and sizes. They also come in very different projections. Projections is the format that we make the maps to show what the world is on a flat surface. So as we know, the earth is not flat. It is a round object go screaming through space, kind of like the orange on the right. Um, the person here drew the globe on the orange, and as we see, when we try to make it a flat representation, it can't be a perfect square. So when we have projections, we see that there's a little bit of distortion on how the world looks. Specifically, if we look at Greenland, which is in the top, it's a little blue kind of continent or landform. Then we look at Africa, and we see that Africa and Greenland on the projection or the map on the left they're very close to being the same size. But if we look at the orange, Greenland is a lot smaller than Africa. The distortion that we have on the left makes that because again, we're trying to make a circle or a sphere into a square. Now, the two things that we need to know about maps is longitude and latitude. And the reason why we need to know these two things is because that's how we figure out where we are on the world, on the globe itself, right? Starting with longitude, we see that it starts at the prime meridian, right? The prime meridian goes through a place called Greenwich, England. And this is where someone came up with the idea of dividing the globe into 360 degrees and then further separating that in half, going east and west. Longitude, the lines go north and south, and we measure them as they go east and west. And on top of this, they are also broken down from degrees to minutes to seconds, and even further than that to get pinpoint spots on the Earth. But as we see with longitude, it doesn't really give us the up and down, it gives us the left and right. With latitude, it gives us the up and down. So now once we have longitude, figuring out what side of the Earth we're on, going east and west, now with latitude, we're going to figure out from north to south that we are. 0 starts at the equator and goes all the way to the North Pole or all the way down to the South Pole in varying degrees. Right? The difference between longitude and latitude is longitude goes to 180 degrees east and west, while latitude only goes to 90 degrees north and south. Why is this important? All right, well, when it comes in terms of time, latitude and longitude specifically, is kind of like where the sun would hit at certain points. Not everywhere in the world can be 9 o'clock in the morning, and the sun would be rising at some point at 9 o'clock in the morning and setting at some point 9 o'clock in the morning. And we have time zones that correct for that deviation, right? So it's not always going to be the sun will always rise at like 9 o'clock every morning everywhere. So the longitude relates to time as it's going across the Earth. Now latitude is important because that deals with the sun's rays and how the sun hits the Earth. And in certain parts we have sun all the time. All right, between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, that is the northernmost limit of the sun's rays going up and the southernmost limit of the rays going down. All right, the equator is like when we have the equinoxes during the year, that's where the sun is right at the halfway point covering the Earth. We see that it's a lot hotter down there and it's a lot warmer and moister. It's a very much more pleasant area to be in some areas. Now we also have two other important lines of latitude. We have the Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle. Now, when the sun is all the way at the south and it's gone all the way to the farthest extent by the Tropic of Capricorn, the Antarctic Circle, everything above it stays dark until the sun can come back up and actually reflect light into there. And it's the same way with the Antarctic Circle when the sun is during our summer up by the Tropic of Cancer. Now, when we look at longitude and latitude, we look at maps. Normally, we're not seeing a map specifically of everything there is on the globe. Sometimes we get really small maps of smaller areas, and we have to figure out where exactly these are. Now, sometimes maps will have like a little image in the top that will show you exactly where this map was taken from the Earth. But if we didn't have that, we can see that on the top part, the bottom part, the left and the right of the map, we see that the latitudes and longitudes are right there. So we can actually use those and figure out where all these points are. All right. So in the chat of the video, or if we're in class, let's write down kind of at the top or on the back of the first page of your worksheet where B is for what the latitude and longitude is for B. All right. Now it doesn't, at this point in time, it doesn't matter if you put the longitude or latitude first, because we'll cover that and we'll do that together as an exercise later on in the week. Let me go back one. Leave that up for a little bit. All right, has everyone put B down? All right, let's actually go through this and figure this out. All right, so if we're going to do the top, right, which is our longitudes. All right, so we have our longitudes up here. We have 118 degrees right here, and 117 degrees and 45 minutes. All right, so obviously with 45, now we're counting up. All right, so 117 and 50 minutes, 117 and 55 minutes, Then we go all the way, once the hour turns, we have now another degree. All right, it's the same way with the latitude. So we start off at the bottom and read up. We have 40 degrees, 15 seconds, 40 degrees, 20 seconds, 40 minutes, not seconds, 40 degrees and 25 minutes. So the latitude, and it doesn't say east or west, would be 117.55 or 117 degrees and 55 minutes, and then 40 degrees and 25 minutes. All right. Did everyone get that right? Oh, that's awesome. Good job. Now let's talk about the purposes of the map. So not just are we trying to find our location where we could be on the Earth or United States or South Dakota or Brookings, like maps also tell us a story of what's going on. So like with treasure maps, it's like the point of a treasure map is to go out and find the treasure, right? So we see where we are, we see where the treasure was buried, we see how to get to the treasure. Or like if we were doing populations, like where is the most populated places in South Dakota, we might have a choropleth map, kind of like the one in the top left, where it shows the densities or where more people are than where people aren't. Or we might have like a park map of Wisconsin right here, where it shows in Wisconsin where all the parks are in Wisconsin. All right, these can cover so many. The limits are endless of what you want to convey on a map and what you can tell on a map. Right here, we're going to talk about a story right now with data on maps. All right, maps answer questions. So let's talk about McDonald's. Like if you eat McDonald's every day, you're not going to be the healthiest individual, all right? And someone decided to ask the question, does the presence of McDonald's, relate with people's obesity, right? So we see the two maps. We have the one on the left, which is the 2007 data of where people in the United States are most obese, right? We see that the data shows a range from zero. The obesity prevalence is zero all the way up to greater than 30%. All right. The darker it is, the more people are bigger. All right. So we see that a lot of the South is a lot more obese. We see some places in Nevada, the Midwest as well. Then on the right, we see where all the McDonald's locations are in those specific counties. Now we also see that both of these maps are all broken down into the counties specifically, and like how many McDonald's are in each specific county. All right, and then where the fat people are in each specific county. Now what we see with this as well is that there are places where people are fat or obese that aren't that have no McDonald's. All right, we can look at the picture of in Alaska, the farthest county in the north, where they have a greater than 30% obesity, but they have no McDonald's. And as well, in Hawaii, where Hawaii has that same, they have a ton of McDonald's, but their obesity issues aren't as big. And as well, in places like the South or places like the Midwest, where there might not be any McDonald's because it's just all farmland, kind of like if we go out towards Huron and Pierre and go north of Pierre, there's nothing really out there, but there's still people that are a little bit bigger. So then how do we answer that question? See, and a lot of like some of this data can be kind of misinterpreted because some of these counties are so big and there's so many McDonald's, obviously, in some of these counties that it's not really a great representation. Let's talk about the important pieces of a map, all right? So now we saw in those last two maps, we saw that we had a title. It told us what we're trying to read off of this, kind of like a book, all right? It gave us the data, all right, in the form of a legend or a key, like in telling us how, like what the colors mean, and or if it wasn't colors, if it was what certain symbols will mean. As well, it shows us which direction is north, because not all maps are going to be directed, and most maps are directed north, but you can see some maps are directed south. If you're in the southern hemisphere, there might be maps that are oriented east. It's just as long as you know which direction is north, you know which way to point it and which direction to go from there. As well, we have a scale bar. So, like, how far is a unit of measurement? If we were to take a ruler and measure on the map how far Romania is to the United Kingdom or to Ireland, we'd be able to figure that out with just a ruler. As well as